Hey everybody, it's Eric. I want to give you guys kind of a fun, exciting assignment. What's sort of happening at this point? You're kind of grinding through stories a little bit, and you're probably having a little of that feeling like, uh, where is this all going, right? You've probably gotten to that 8, 10, 12, 15,000 words of stories. It's a little bit like trying to piece it all together. So I've got a cool assignment for you that I want you to tackle in the next 4 or 5 days, and that is I want you to go to the bookstore. Now, you may be thinking, like, do bookstores even exist anymore? They still do, I promise you. Funny enough, Amazon just put one of those new fancy bookstores down on M Street here in Georgetown. So they exist, but find a bookstore. It doesn't matter what it is. It can even be something as simple as the airport bookstore, but I'd urge you to find a real bookstore. And I want you to go because we're going to help you start to look for book models. Now, a key thing that I was sort of interested in learning when I started figuring out how other people write books is that there's a sort of a premise that we actually steal from a guy named Steve Jobs. And Steve Jobs had a phrase that was talking about kind of his approach to creativity, his approach to sort of coming up with products and ideas. And basically, what he said is good artists sort of copy, but great artists steal. And so, what we're going to wind up doing is using that premise to not sort of copy from other books, but we're going to steal kind of some elements or structures or models from books that we really admire. So let me tell you a little bit about how it works. Let me give you a quick example from the book I'm working on. So I'm working on a book right now called Cred. And Cred is really a book that details some of the stuff that I learned from some of my research, trying to understand kind of what does it take to create credibility today. And so as I was thinking a lot about what books that I wanted to use or admire or look at, I needed to find my own models. And really what the model is going to be used for is a few things. Number one, you're going to use it to sort of model on how you turn your stories into chapters. That's one thing. Number two, you're going to use it for style to understand how they use their intros, how they use other helpful elements, what kind of things do they do, how do they even do citations. So that's the second thing. And the third thing is you're going to want to learn to sort of understand depth behind it. What are the things that they include in terms of research elements, expert opinions, and stuff like that. So the book model is really a model for what you want your book to look like. And so for me, writing this book, as I understood who I wanted to be and who I wanted to look like, I actually found 4 authors and 4 books that I really admired. So for my book, I wanted to make sure that I, as someone who's a professor, could basically have some level of sort of sophistication and depth that would admire in the same way. So 4 authors that I started to admire are Adam Grant and his book, Give and Take. Second one is Angela Duckworth, and her book is Grit. Both those two are actually professors at University of Pennsylvania at Wharton. So those are 2 people that I liked the books and I liked the structure that they wrote and also where they are. Those are 2 people that I admire. The other one is a guy named Simon Sinek. We sort of talked about him several times, and he has a premise called Start With Why. And so I actually came up with that premise as one that I liked. His book, I like some of the tones behind it. The last one was by James Altshuler, which is called Choose Yourself. And what I liked about that was sort of some of the style that he used and some of the ways he talked about it. So the way that I actually found this is I went to the bookstore. I looked around, I pulled these sorts of things, I read them, I flipped through them, I sort of read the first chapter, I read the introduction, I looked at structures, I took pictures of things, I used all these elements to come up with models, and ultimately I came up with these 4. And if I had to sort of pick the one that I most modeled on, it's actually a combination of Give and Take and Grit. Those were the 2 that I really used. I read the back of the book. I want to understand how they described it. I want to understand those pieces. So that's what I want you to do. I want you to go out and find it. One way that I found is also really helpful is could you just sort of page through things like on a tool like Blinkist. Blinkist is a tool, it's a little bit like the Cliff Notes for today's generation for mobile, but I use it all the time. I sort of have it on my phone right here, so I can just sort of be looking through books that I find to be interesting. So maybe that's a model. It's $50, but it's great. Again, you can read a bunch of sort of summaries of books in very quick terms. So use this maybe as a tool. Google a little bit, look around, read Amazon, hunt around, but the goal of this is to find 2 to 4 book models that you want, and probably one that you find as your primary model. So as you go to the bookstore, look at it. Understand, like, how is it actually structured? Look at the table of contents and understand what are the chapters they use, the parts. Read the entire introduction, skim a few chapters, and look at the parts. And if you find something that you kind of connect with, buy it, get it, have a copy of it, or get an e-version of it. Again, as I've been writing my book, I literally have a stack of those books sitting next to me, and I'll page it out so I look to see, all right, what does this chapter look like? How did they organize it? Remember, back to what Steve Jobs said, good artists copy, great artists steal. So we're going to steal elements from the books that we like the most. Now remember, you may be thinking, oh gosh, am I stealing from a book that I admire? No, you're just stealing the structure and plugging in your pieces to it. So if they organize their chapters a particular way, or they organize the book a certain way, or they have a certain tone and style, they put quotes at the beginning and have pieces at the end, steal those elements to structure around your book. And that's really the core that you're looking for. Remember, decide what you like and what you don't like. Ultimately, you've got a lot of knowledge, you've got a lot of pieces. You now should have sort of a bunch of stories that you've been looking at, a bunch of research, a bunch of pieces that you have. And what we're going to be doing over the next few weeks is starting to turn that into a manuscript structure. We're going to be starting to put together the first trappings of an outline, of a table of content, and some of this stuff is going to require you to have books to look at and sort of see what you admire. So that's really the goal of this process. Go out to the bookstore, find a book or two or three or four that you really like, pick it up, take pictures of the table of contents if you want, whatever it is, but plan to spend an hour or two just looking at books you admire and see, what would I like my book to feel like, to look like, to sort of be talked about similar to, and we're going to use the content you've created to plug into that structure. So that's your homework, book models. Find your handful of book models and buy them. Again, you may find that you buy some digitally, maybe you just take some pictures of some of the other ones, but find them. And again, what I found was when I wrote, I had them stacked there and I would go to them. I would try and understand how they structured things, what they did, because ultimately that's key. And one of the things that people ask me a lot of times, how do we cite things? How do we do footnotes, endnotes? This is where your book models come in. We're going to use that model to make sure that we structure our book in the way that people actually like us do. So if you want to be like Adam Grant, you want to use his structure, you want to use his tone, you want to use his endnotes, his footnotes. It's a helpful way for you to follow along. So get after it, find your book model, and what we're going to do in very soon in one of our sessions is we're going to hear who is your book model or models to help all of us have some ideas about how to help you.